this, this is all taking place under the guise of, quote unquote, standardizing our elections. Who could be against that? But we might have asked the same question of ourselves 100 years ago about the poll tax. Won't that apply to everyone equally, black or white, or a literacy test, or how many gumballs are in the jar? What we know is that these are all efforts at suppressing the votes, not of all Texans in our case here in this state, but of certain Texans. And historically, that has been black Texans, more recently, Latinos and other communities of color. We see it in big cities like the metropolitan county of Harris County, where Judge Hidalgo has done such an extraordinary job of investing in access to the polls for Republicans, Democrats, independents, and otherwise. That's what this is a part of. And it's also a piece, Ali, of the big lie and what happened on the 6th of January. And this effort to change the rules of our elections to be able to consolidate the hold on power that Republicans have in states like Georgia and Florida and Texas. The answer to this, of course, has to be federal legislation and the For the People Act, which has passed the House of Representatives and now is pending in the Senate. And all it lacks for is our full commitment and leadership from the Senate to the White House and to the American people that those in positions of public trust listen to. This is our moment of truth.
And I want to talk about the For the People Act in a moment, but Judge Hidalgo, good to see you again. The Texas Tribune talks about the number of polling places that are being cut. It reads, the voters in some areas, Democratic areas of Harris and Tarrant counties, would see a drastic drop in polling places under the Senate version of Senate Bill 7, a Texas Tribune analysis shows. Let's just explain what this means. What has changed? There used to be this idea that people should vote near their homes. When I vote a few blocks from my home. And there are all sorts of issues with that because sometimes the lineups are long and stuff like that, but people vote close to their homes. That's not the case. It's 2021. We've got a rover on Mars, and yet we are reducing the number of places people can vote at.
Right. And the motive behind these bills becomes clear through those kinds of provisions that have been shown, as that Tribune article shows, to be reducing polling locations in minority neighborhoods. What it does is it micromanages the ways counties like ours can distribute polling locations and voting machines. And the end result of it is fewer locations in minority neighborhoods and long lines. We had innovated to all but eliminate lines. Look, there are many provisions. We don't know, as you said, what's going to come out of this because it's happening behind closed doors. But irrespective of what passes, the simple idea that they're making policy based on a lie that there was election fraud on a massive scale, that in and of itself lends credence to that lie, to the point that it weakens our own voters' faith in our democracy, and it weakens our own democracy standing abroad. So when folks ask, what's worse, what's best, really the concept itself is so dangerous and will have enormous effects. And the fact that it's not happening only here in Texas, but in so many places around the country, needs to be a wake-up call. And you can be sure us in Harris County are not about to give up, even if this passes. This is not going to be the end of the fight.
Congressman O'Rourke, let's talk about the For the People Act. To some people who've never had any trouble voting, it may be an abstraction, but there are a number of things which I'm going to put on the screen that the act will address. Three of them are directly about the things that you're seeing in Texas: strengthening mail voting systems, preventing unreasonable wait times at the polls, protecting against deceptive practices. These are things that are meant to spread the idea that everybody who is qualified to vote in this country should vote. We should think that's a good thing. And SB 1, the For the People Act, would be the kind of thing that would mean that those federal rules and standards can be applied across the country.
That's right. And if you see, as we connect the dots in these 47 states that have more than 361 voter suppression bills either passed or pending, the greatest attack on multiracial democracy since the Voting Rights Act of 1965, in other words, trying to take us back to Jim Crow, then we need a commensurate response like that Voting Rights Act. And that's the For the People Act. It has passed the House of Representatives. It's pending in the Senate, has all the benefits that you just enumerated. And then, Ali, there's this. If, like me, you are sick and tired of members of Congress choosing their voters instead of the other way around, and the gerrymandering that takes place in Texas and most states in our union, this bill would set up independent, nonpartisan redistricting commissions so that there's a fair and level playing field, fair maps from which we can choose those who will represent us. That's good for Republicans. That's good for Democrats. That's just good for Americans. It's good for democracy. And that's why we've got to get this passed. If we fail to do this, and we really only have this summer to do this work and get it passed, we don't only lose this window this year or this cycle, we might very well, given the threats that are arrayed against us that we saw on display on January 6th, we might very well lose this democracy forever. It's that important. And so let's all commit ourselves to doing all that we can to get this passed and urging President Biden to make this his #1 priority.
Judge Hidalgo, the Texas NAACP took out an ad in the Austin American Statesman on the 21st in which it says the bill's use of precinct poll watchers to harass and record voters with impunity, even being authorized to record a person's vote or get in their personal space, is designed for nothing other than intimidation of voters of color. We've seen these intimidation tactics used throughout history to keep people of color from the polls, and we will not fail them now. This is one of the things we're seeing in Texas and in other places, tacit or explicit intimidation of voters. How do you overcome this if not just in fighting these pieces of legislation? How do we get voters to understand this is your right, guaranteed under the Constitution? You cannot be bullied out of your right to vote.
Well, let me explain. What the NAACP said is not an exaggeration. One of the proposals under the Senate bill was to have poll watchers be able to record voters as they're casting their vote and make it a misdemeanor for poll workers to so much as stand in the line of sight. And so much of this, it just goes beyond the pale. There's obstacles to mail ballot voting for voters with disabilities. Right now, the fight is still on. We need that recognition that this is about democracy, the democracy we're proud of and that makes our country what it is. Once something passes, it's in the courts. We've given authority to our county attorney's office here in Harris County to file any and all litigation he needs to file to fight voter suppression bills. And after that, and even now, it really does land at the footsteps of the federal government. As a Texan, I feel a responsibility to continue the legacy of Lyndon B. Johnson, who passed the Voting Rights Act. But as Americans, all of us need to feel the responsibility to protect the democracy that people died for, not just during the time of MLK, but in fighting our wars abroad that so many people have come to this country in search for. It is not worth any political points that these Republicans are scoring. Our democracy is not worth that. This is not just a partisan political fight. This needs to be able to stay above partisanship because it's about our ability to have a democracy, and we can't weaken it by making policy based on a lie.